Okay, so how's everyone doing today?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm good. It's like snowing by me, and I'm just like dreading having to shovel and dig out my car because I have
Oh,
to go to
no
the
way.
store.
I guess, how about you, Margaret? How's your day been?
So far, so good. I managed to make my hair fun colors over the weekend, which is very pleasing to me. I really enjoy the fun colors in my peripheral vision. That's why I keep doing it. And it had grown out to the point that it needed to be bleached again before the colors would be bright and pop in. And I got it to happen, and I'm happy. By got it to happen, I mean I did it.
Oh my god, it looks awesome. I love it.
Thank you. It's
I
very
dyed my hair blue, like the ends of it, like a few weeks ago, but then it like washed out so quickly to be like a really weird green, and I had to just like restart and dye it brown again because I couldn't be bothered.
So for my blue, I'm probably gonna end up hitting up my blue before I hit up my pink again. And for my blue, I tend to let it sit for just a really long time because I like a really deep dark blue. But that is pretty hard to
Yeah.
accomplish.
No, yeah. The first time I did it, it was like a really dark blue and it looked really good. But then after like 3 washes, it was like it faded to like a nice blue. And then like very quickly it faded to like green. And I don't know. The green did look cool for a little while, but then it just like faded to like yellow that looked like it looked like I had bleached my hair and just like had spent too much time in the pool and like that kind of green. So
Fun fact, that's actually why I dyed my hair the first time. Right before I started high school, I spent that entire summer in the pool and my hair turned that really unpleasant green color. And I was like, I am not starting high school with the worst green hair ever. And my mom let me dye my hair and I was just like, yay, random not green color.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know so many friends that do swim and their hair is like so blonde because they like just spend so much time in the water. But without further ado, let's get started with our live stream today. So once again, this is the Intro to JavaScript BitCamp with Twilio, week 2. And I think that Margaret's going to talk to us like a little bit about like Twilio and what it is and like what they do over at Twilio.
Yeah, so Twilio is a communications platform. And so the way that Twilio first came into being more than a decade ago now is a developer noticed that it was really practically impossible levels of difficult to add communications to your applications as like a web or app developer, because you had to like interact with these like ancient telecom systems that were like super difficult and weird and weren't well documented because it wasn't from an era of technology where they expected like everybody to want to learn how to interact with it. So they just assumed that one guy knowing how to do that was enough. And so this developer, our fearless leader Jeff Lawson, he was just like, oh, why isn't there an API for that? And so he made an API for that. And that was the beginning of Twilio. And in the more than 10 years that have followed, we have just expanded our API offerings from where they started, which was SMS and voice, to basically any form of communication that you can think of that isn't like in person. So if there is a form of communication that you would like to add to your application or your website, then Twilio has an API to make that very easy and straightforward for you. And that's very much the central driving force behind Twilio, is just identifying developer pain points and fixing them. And over the years, that has started to include some things that have UIs. As a developer, I'm not super into UIs. I wish everything could be code because UIs are confusing and code is not, because I am weird like that. But now, having been alleviating these pain points for a number of years, we have actually come out with a few products that like have UIs. For example, we have a fully customizable call center because that was something that developers kept telling us they were being asked to build on top of our APIs over and over again. And they're like, can we please not have to build these things over and over again? And we're like, we got you. So we created a fully customizable call center solution so that developers could just tweak the thing to be what they needed instead of having to build everything from scratch. So there, we have a product with a UI, but mostly it's APIs.
That's so cool. I like it's so funny. I like didn't even I'm a senior in computer science and I didn't know what an API was until this year, because I don't know, they're always so confusing to me.
APIs are magic. Oh, I love APIs. So for anybody that is meeting this term for the first time, yay, congratulations. You're going to love this so much. So APIs are basically, they're just an interface that a programmer will put on top of their big, complicated whatever in order to have other developers be able to interact with their big, complicated whatever through these very specific interface points. So like, say, if I want to access some data from your massive application and you want to make that available to me, you can just create like an endpoint. Think of an endpoint like a web address, and I can message that web address with my application and consume that data and do whatever I want with it without having to learn the ins and outs of your system. So that is what an API is. It is basically just a simple interface for programs to interact with your program.
Yeah, I love them. They're so cool. And yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
I'm always happy to drop knowledge. And if anybody has questions, comments, or concerns, drop them in the chat. I will be paying attention.
Okay, I think that, oh yeah, now so we're going to go over last week's homework. Let me just stop screen sharing and I will pull up my homework files.
So fun fact, Twilio Quest actually started off as the curriculum for our day-long workshops. We have a developer education team, and one of the things that team does is go out in the world and teach developers how to use our APIs. And Twilio Quest was originally invented in order to be the curriculum for those workshop things, but like, it was such a good way to get traction for new developers and experienced developers, to get them able to like interact with the same kind of curriculum in a way that was useful to them, no matter what their background or experience level was, that we just kind of like expanded the content. And so now, as you know, because you are using it to learn JavaScript, there is a whole lot more in Twilio Quest now than just how to interact with our APIs. That content's still in there, still super cool. Check it out. Look at me doing my job. But now there's also a lot more content in there, and we're expanding that every day. And in fact, one of the cool things my team is doing this year is we are trying to get it to the point where other people can add content with something as simple as a pull request. And I am so looking forward to being able to tell people when they ask me for new stuff in Twilio Quests that pull requests are welcome.
That's awesome. I actually just got the homework up, so we are ready to go over it. Let me share my screen.
And if anyone has any questions about the homework, like if you guys ran into any problems or just like any questions in general, like feel free to let us know in the chat and we'll answer them for you.
Okay, so I'm in the Eastern time zone, so it's 2:15 over here. This is what my finished product looked like after doing the homework. You could and then it prints out the time zone and the time. So this is like somewhat what it should look like. It might look a little bit different depending on like how you did it, just because there's a few ways to like complete any task in like HTML and JavaScript. So yeah, I'm gonna go over the steps I took. So actually, let me also pull up the homework.
Somebody in the chat thinks that it would be cool to do a project on how to use the Twilio API, and I completely agree with you.
That would be awesome. Maybe we'll do that. Sounds like a good idea. Okay, so the first part was just like setting up your environment with like Visual Studio Code and setting up your GitHub account. So if you're still having issues with that, just like be sure to like ping me or Emily in the Discord, and like we can help you out. Like I had office hours yesterday, but if anyone is like still struggling, I like might be able to find some time this week to like help you out with that. And that goes for like any type of like homework question. Like if you can't make it to either of our office hours, just let me know. I could probably find time because I haven't started classes yet to like meet with you, and we could like walk through the homework together. So yeah, in this part, you'll basically just be, let me just start a new file actually, and I'll walk through it. Okay, so first off, let's name this file. Let me open this folder. Okay, so new file. I'm going to call it index2.html because I already have an index.html. First thing I'm going to do is this little trick to get my HTML, like, basic stuff out of the way. I'm going to title this, like, week 1. And then once I'm in the body, let's see, I'm going to create something that just says hello world. So I'm literally just going to write hello world in the body, and that should print it out from this. And there we go. So that's task 1, pretty simple. And then for task 2, you're just creating the radio buttons. So I'm going to delete this and create some input fields. Oh wait, it's type equals radio. Silly me. Yeah, we're setting the type property to radio. Name property set to time zone. And then value set to EST. See, value. And then I need an ID property. I'll also set that to EST because that's going to be unique. And then I'm just going to break for a new line. I'm going to copy and paste that because I'm not going to write the same code over and over again. Let's change this to CST. What are the other time zones? Mountain time?
Yeah, MST, PST.
Yeah, awesome. And then I think there's like Hawaii time or something, right?
Yeah.
The last one?
I think, was there a Alaskan one?
Are they the same thing? Wait, let me look at my page.
I forgot.
I literally don't even know. Oh yeah, there's Alaska and then there's Hawaii. Cool. And then I'm also going to create labels for these. So label 4 equals EST. I think that's all I need. And then it's at Eastern Standard Time. I don't even know what these are called. Honestly, I know Eastern Time, I know Pacific Time, and that's it. I like feel like I don't need to know the rest.
Oh yeah, I guess Margaret, which time zone are you checking in from? Like Danielle is on the East Coast and I'm on the West Coast. I'm PST and she's EST.
I am on the West Coast.
Oh, nice, nice,
Yeah.
nice.
West Coast, best coast.
Yep.
I'm going to copy from my other code just because I don't know what time zones there are. Alaska Standard Time and Hawaii Aleutian. Okay.
I think you just copy and paste it.
Yeah, I'm just going to copy it.
And I guess for the homework, as you notice, like Danielle's like giving IDs for each one, so it's okay if your IDs are like different than the one she set. But yeah, this is like a general kind of layout of what you should have for the homework. But yeah.
Yeah, I literally the IDs don't really matter as long as you like use them the right way. These are just like placeholders basically, I guess. Not placeholders, but like yeah, as long as you're consistent with the way you use them, it doesn't matter what you name them. This is just what I chose to name them. And also, you don't have to create a label. It's just when you go to styling, it might be easier because it means like you can group all of these labels together when we use CSS. But you can also just like write it in between the breaks and it will print out the same way. And also, it doesn't matter how you name the time zones. I don't really care. Okay, let's run this now and see if these radio buttons pop up. Okay, so I put the break in the wrong spot. Break should go after the label, or else this doesn't make any sense. Okay, cool. So now I've got these clickable buttons that only allows you to select one at a time. Awesome. What's next? Okay, now we're going to add a submit button. So button tag type equals button and value equals submit, and then I'm going to write submit here. And now there's a little button. Awesome. Okay, so now on to step 3. Yeah, and then here's a picture of what it should look like.
I guess, do you want to add a title for, I guess, the form?
Oh yeah, so I'll write, I want to add like a title to the page. Not like a title, I guess it's not the best word because this is a title. But if I wanted to like put something above that's just like text, you don't even need the paragraph tag. I'm just going to use it so that like things are grouped together better. But I'm just going to write select your time zone using the paragraph tag. This way it creates a new line after without me having to add a break. And yeah, so now it says select your time zone. Okay, so now inside the body after all of this, we're going to open up the script tag with type equals text / JavaScript. I don't even think you need to have the type tag there, if I'm correct. But the script tag is what's going to convert everything inside of it to JavaScript. Okay, so first thing, we're defining a function, read form. And then inside, define two variables, are my are all equals value. Okay, yeah, we're not naming it that though. Sorry. We can do this by setting. Okay, so let's call this radio buttons, and we'll set it equal to document get elements by name, and then I named my everything time zone, as you can see up here. And then the second variable is going to be the selected item. So radio buttons, we're going to set this equal to the first radio button by default until we find it. And we're going to set it equal to that value. So this variable right now is set to EST. Okay, so now we'll cycle through all of them. So we'll do a for loop. So the first thing we want to do is check to see if radio buttons.I is checked. Oops. And selected equals radio buttons.I. And basically, every time to explain these two lines a little bit better, the input field has like type equals radio and like name. These are all attributes like ID, value, name, and type of the input field. So another attribute of the input field is checked, and when this element is true, then that means that that button is being selected. So the checked element would be false for all of these except for the Alaska Standard Time, which would be true because it's checked when we hit submit. So yeah, this is just looping through all of those input fields to check to see if any of those buttons have been selected. And then once it finds the one that's been selected, we set this variable that we defined before the for loop to that radio button at I should be that value.
You could optionally also exit your loop at that point since you have found what you were looking for. Completely optional, just something to keep in mind if you are ever trying to find something in a big old stack of data. It's generally good practice to go ahead and exit your loop once you've found what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And you could do this just by writing break, and this will break your for loop. Okay, and then once you've been checked, place this if statement inside of your for loop. All right, and then after that, you could either do this next step inside of the if statement or outside of the for loop. I like to do it outside of the for loop just to like make sure nothing gets written over. But yeah, I would recommend doing it outside of your for loop, but you can do it inside the if statement. So we're going to print out this selected value onto the page. So document.getElementById. Oh, right. And then before we do that, we actually have to create this div element. Actually, we could just do a paragraph element too, where ID equals result. And this is going to be, we don't want to keep anything in here for now, but right after we find that selected element, we're going to use this space to print out the selected element. So get element by ID result dot inner HTML equals selected. Right. So basically, to break this down, this grabs the document, like the HTML document from above, finds an element with the ID result, and we're using the ID tool because IDs are unique. And it grabs the inner HTML, which is like what's in here, and sets it equal to something new. So let's see if, oh, and then finally we just need to change our submit button so that, whatchamacallit, it calls this function when we hit it. So our function is called read form. And then we also want to put all of this inside of a form tag for organizational purposes. Okay, now I think that should work. So we'll refresh our page. And then it prints out. And yeah, so now we have a working like radio button feature that prints out the selected item. Okay, so on to the next step, I think. Now we're just going to write some JavaScript that prints out the time. So function print time. Create a variable day equals new date. And then hour variable. So day dot get hour.
Oh, it seems like someone commented, can we see your code again, please? Is there a particular section that you wanted to see, or?
Yeah, let me see if I could like scroll up as much as possible. Is that good? Or?
Yeah, is that okay? Or I guess I don't know how you feel about do you think we should maybe like share the code afterwards? Or
Yeah, actually, if you go onto the GitHub, oh, I haven't merged the branch yet, but after this meeting, I'll have the source code for all of the homeworks on there in case you like get lost or just want to refer back to something to like check. But this will definitely be on GitHub, and I'll post a link to the GitHub again in the Discord after the stream.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so yeah, we're just going to create variables for the hour, the minutes, and the second. And these are all just like built-in features of JavaScript that allow you to like grab the current time from your local machine. Okay, cool. So we've already selected all of those. So I'm also going to create a session variable. AM. And this is just going to tell us if it's like AM or PM. And I'm just going to copy and paste that code so that we don't spend too much time on this. But if you have any questions about it, feel free to like message me later and I can explain it. So also just going to create this time variable. And you can just, this works because you're able to concatenate strings with variables in JavaScript. So I'm just doing like var time equals second hour plus this colon plus minute plus another colon plus second, so that it separates out the text and like makes sense when you look at it. Plus session. And then also the session variable, I'll just write it up really quick. So if hour is greater than 12, then hour equals hour minus 12. Let me make sure that's right. Yeah, and then session equals PM. Also, if hour equals 0, then we want it to print hour equals 12. Because if it's like 12:30 a.m., it's going to show as like 0:30, but because we're using like this little session variable, we want it to show 12 o'clock. Session equals a.m. I think that's everything for the session variable. Okay, let me try printing this out now. Oh, I have to click show clock. So once you define this variable, you just print time. Let me see. I didn't actually follow the instructions. I just kind of did whatever I was doing. Oh yeah, I actually have to print it somewhere. So I'm going to create another paragraph element where ID equals time, and then grab that using the same methods I used before with the document get element by ID thing. It's going to be time, and your element is time.
It looks like you're defining minute as minutes and then calling it as minute.
Oh, that's probably the issue. Thank you. And same thing with seconds. Let me try that now. Okay, yeah. So I also just need to call something to set the thing to timeout so that this doesn't only update when I refresh the page. So we want this to like the time to be updated every second. So we're going to do this thing called set timeout, which is just a JavaScript function. And every 100 seconds, we want to, 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second, we want to call this print time function. And so the second variable, or the second argument, is 1,000 because it's measured in milliseconds, not seconds. And then, yeah, so now it should update every second. And we'll see it's 2:41 p.m. And these buttons don't really work yet, but they still print out that. And then I think the last thing that we're going to do is actually get those buttons to like change the time zone. So similar to the way we have like if statements over here, we're going to add some if statements to the read form. First thing we want to do is create a variable that, actually I'm going to create this variable globally. So when I say globally, I mean like this variable exists for like the entire like JavaScript file, I guess, or runtime. But so it just means that I'm creating this variable outside of a function, like for any function to be able to use. So I'm going to call this variable offset. and I'm going to set it to 0. Next, I'm just going to use a little like a series of if statements in the read form function that takes the selected variable and changes the offset based on that. So if selected equals est, then the offset is going to be 0 because I'm in the Eastern time zone. And next, so let's do else if selected equals cst. I'm going to set this offset to -1. And then I'm just going to copy and paste that for like the rest of them.
I guess for like if and else statements and switch statements, do you think there is like really any difference, or there's like you should prefer using like one over the other?
It's mostly about readability. So with if-else statements, you have more flexibility than with a switch statement, because with a switch statement, you can only be evaluating the same variable with every switch instance. Whereas with if-else, you can have like whatever weird condition you want within each if-else. So like in this situation, they are equivalent, and you should select based on what is easiest for you or theoretically your team to read. But also, no matter what of the 10,000 ways there are to do everything, just make sure that you're documenting the why in addition to the how, so that future you and anybody else who comes across your code will have some sort of orientation and context with which to understand what's going on.
Yeah, I guess in this case, it really just it's whatever makes sense to you. I like using if statements. I think they're simple. But if you want to use a switch statement, it might just be like simpler for you. But yeah, once you have all of those done, I have the offset set so that like I know that the Central Standard Time is 1 hour behind me, so I set it equal to -1, and like Pacific Time is 3 hours behind me, so I set it to -3. And then when I get to this defining this hours variable, I am going to add the offset. You could also, if you're in the Eastern time zone, you could make these all positive and subtract the offset. Or if you're in Pacific time, I only did this as an example, like because if you're in like the middle, like if you're in Pacific time, you could mix like negative numbers with positive numbers. And I think that's a little less confusing than subtracting the offset. But yeah, there's a million ways to do this. And then once this function has determined which which time zone we're in, we're just going to want to call this print time function again so that it updates based on whatever was submitted. And then I think that should make it work. So let's test this out. Yep. So we have it as 1 o'clock. 12 o'clock. Yeah, this seems to work. Okay. So does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions?
I guess somebody did ask, do you write pseudocode first? And I guess Margaret answered that question, but I don't know. How about you, Danielle? Do you usually write pseudocode first and based off that, or do you just kind of dive straight in?
It really depends on what I'm doing. I usually do write pseudocode. I find it a lot easier to like, especially if I'm doing a bigger program, write down like what I know that I have to do, like maybe just like a few steps. And then from there, I will write pseudocode. And then from there, I write my actual code. For something like this, where like I already kind of walk you through it, I would definitely like just start out with pseudocode, if anything, and then write out these steps. I think that pseudocode also helps you understand what you're doing a lot better. But so I would recommend writing pseudocode, but if it's not for you, it's not for you.
I do think it's important to have a mental model, a map of what you're attempting to do before you start laying down code. And pseudocode is great for that for a lot of people. for me, I tend to be like pen, pencil, and paper because that helps my brain sort things out. So I will absolutely like, I guess, draw the equivalent of drawn pseudocode in order to make sure that I have a good mental model of what I'm attempting to accomplish before I start laying down actual functional code. This is probably not going to be super relevant to you right at this moment in your developer career, but like as you move forward, one thing that I would like to point out is very helpful for me is starting with data considerations. With any kind of project, I always try to start out with what data am I going to need to interact with? What data do I have access to? I always try and start with the data model first, and that just helps me create that mental model, that mental map of what I'm going to be attempting to accomplish. But you should really do that, create that mental model in whatever way works best for you.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Coding has like a million different ways of doing something. So like it really is whatever works best for you. But yeah, any other questions on the homework, or do you guys want to move along?
See, I think we can move along. Those are all the questions we have now. But if you guys have any other questions, you can just feel free to drop them in, and yeah, we'll answer them.
Yeah, also all of the homework answers will be posted on whatchamacallit, GitHub today. So okay, so now on to the actual lecture. Okay, so I think Emily's going to be talking a little bit about the introduction to CSS right now.
Yeah, so I guess what we'll be going over today is creating a CSS file, defining the classes for features in HTML, learning attributes and properties in HTML and CSS, and then finally getting to stylize your digital clock and other features in CSS. So it'll be a fun time. So exactly what is CSS? So
CSS is magic. I knew the answer to this one. It's magic.
Magic. The correct answer. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and these CSS basically specifies a document style. So using CSS, you can really kind of stylize the layout, font, and colors of what you have. And style sheets can be internal, external, or inline. And we'll dive into like what exactly this means. But what we'll be focusing on for your clock is external. So we'll be using a CSS file and then kind of linking it to your HTML file. And we'll show you how you do that later on. And from our first week's, I guess, live stream, I mentioned that HTML is kind of like the foundation, and CSS is kind of like the aesthetic choices that you add to that foundation to make the foundation look all pretty and fun. So yeah. So CSS is a rule-based language, and the developer defines these rules by specifying groups of styles that should be applied to particular elements or groups of elements on your web page. So usually these rules will open with a selector, and this selector selects the element that is to be styled. And the selector, I guess we will show you an example on the next page so you guys get a better mental picture of what this exactly looks like. But these selectors are followed with curly braces, and inside of these are the declarations that have property value pairs that basically stylize the elements that are selected. So yeah. So this is a CSS syntax. I guess what you can see is at the top, we are incorporating CSS into the HTML. So as you can see in the head element of the HTML, we are using a link tag, and we are using the attributes style sheet, and then mystyle.css. Mystyle.css is the name of the CSS file. And in the I guess these are the 3 ways that you're allowed to do it. So that is one way how to do it. It is the way that you'll be able to do for your homework. And for internal CSS, you could also, similar to how you can add in JavaScript inline into your HTML file, what you use to kind of incorporate CSS into your HTML file is using style tags. So as you can see in the head element, there is a style tag, and inside is the body selector. So this would change the body element of your web page. And then the third way to incorporate CSS is inline. So you can just attach it directly within the tags of your HTML. I guess this could be a little complicated if you really want to like tack on a lot of style onto your elements. So what we will be doing is to kind of like for organization purposes is to create an external file and then linking it with our HTML file.
Yeah, I think that inline CSS can be very useful if you just want to like change one very specific element on your page. So like that's the only place I would really use it. I wouldn't write all of your CSS like inline, or else it can get like super bulky and repetitive and just annoying. So we'll mostly be using external files to write all of our CSS in.
And then this is the syntax for it. Sorry, I think I accidentally moved the slide one lower, but this was supposed to go with the slide before. I guess the slide before the slide before. But essentially, this is like what the syntax, what you'll see a lot of in CSS. So there is a selector. So our selector in this example is P. So this will select all the elements, the paragraph elements. And inside the curly braces, you can put the declarations of how you want to style all these paragraph elements. So for the first property, there's font size, and the value is set to 5 pixels. And the other property is color. And these properties, I guess in examples further down the slides, you'll see it'll be better organized. What you usually do is try to like indent after the first curly brace, and then separate these properties with semicolons at the end. Oh, and I think there's
there's like a little typo here.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be a colon. I'll fix that before I post the slides, but just so you're not confused right now.
Yeah, so don't get confused. Make sure to only use a semicolon after you're done with the declaration. So yeah, don't do that, but we'll fix that. And then what you can also do is comment in CSS code. So let's say you write this like I guess your CSS and you want to there's a lot of code and you kind of want to be able to reference back on it to remember what exactly this does or what this references to. So what you can do is do a slash and an asterisk and write whatever you want inside, and this will not affect any of the CSS code. It's more of like a note to yourself or a note to maybe developers who may be reading your code. And yeah, it's for like readability, and it's easier to kind of reference back on if you want to remember what exactly a certain part of this code does and all that. So comments can be very helpful. Obviously, they're not required, but we definitely recommend it if you want to be able to check back on your code and for like readability.
Comments are super important, and I want to double down on that. And I also want to mention, in addition to being an absolutely vital way to document what stuff is doing and why, it also can be really useful when you're troubleshooting, because if you put code inside of comments, then that code stops running and becomes comments. So if you're trying to narrow down where something is happening and you're not really sure where to start, you can start by narrowing down which of your code is active at any given time by putting some of it inside of comments, so that you can kind of step your way through what code is doing what.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember sometimes when I was working on a program and then I think just like nothing's working, but I'm like, oh, I think this is like the problematic area. I'll just take that code, but I don't want to lose it completely, like in case I make it even worse than what I plan on doing. So what you can do is take that code, comment it out, copy it, and then adjust the code and see if it works. But yeah, comments can be there to like help you out with fixing your code or just like helping you reference it in the future. So yeah, use comments, y'all. And then, so this is an example of using CSS. So what you see, like for the HTML line, this is what you see in your HTML file. So hello world, that is put in the header 1 element. And in your CSS file, what you would have to maybe stylize this is your selector, which is header 1, and the curly braces. And what we put into this selector is the color and font size property. So what this will do is change the color and the size of Hello World. So yeah, this is a pretty simple example. Definitely in CSS you can do a lot of different things with what you can put in selectors. So you can change font size, color. You could even change the font type or all that. So I definitely recommend, if you guys have any extra time, to play around with it, because for this week's homework you can really stylize it to however you want. So yeah, just go crazy.
Yeah, also something I think is kind of important. So the color attribute for CSS, I was so confused by it at first. It means your font color, not the actual color of your page or anything. Maybe that's obvious to other people, but it wasn't obvious to me. So I just wanted to make note of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other property was background color. That
Yeah.
is what affects the actual kind of like whole element. So yeah, I remember I used to get tripped up on that too. I was just like, I'm using the color property. Why isn't the color working? But yeah, definitely keep that in mind. And then this is another example. So what you can see is we are selecting the element with by referencing its class. So for the HTML, we have given the paragraph element the class example. So in CSS, what you would do is do a period in front and then the class. And I believe if it's an ID, you would do, like, let's say the paragraph element had the ID example. What you would do is do a pound symbol or a hashtag example. But I guess in this example, you'll be using period and an example. And as you can see in our properties, we use the font family. So this is how to change like the font type, or like you can use like Arial. And I believe if you Google like CSS fonts, they'll bring up a list of like what fonts you can really change into by default. There's also ways where you can like incorporate fonts from like external sources like Google Fonts. And if you guys want to play around with that, I definitely recommend you check that out. And for the border property, this puts a border around the paragraph element. So yeah, that is
Yeah.
So one thing to note as far as class versus ID goes is class is something that you can tag onto any number of elements, and they don't even have to be the same type. Like you can style things, you can style divs and text and whatever the same just by giving it the same class, and that same chunk of CSS will operate on all of those different elements. However, an ID is intended to be unique to that element. So the reason to understand that distinction, and honestly the reason to understand the various distinctions of how to declare CSS, is because CSS operates by finding the most specific style and applying that. So like if you have styles for all paragraphs, and then you have styles for a specific class that you've applied to paragraphs, and then you have styles for the specific ID of one paragraph, then CSS is going to cascade all the way down to that most specific definition, which in this case would be the ID, and that's the style that will be applied. But only for those specific assignments. So if I have defined font family in every single one of those categories, then the most specific one will play out. But if I've only defined border in the top level, most generic style, then that will also show up. And that's the cascading part of cascading style sheets.
Yeah. That's a really important tip. And also, one thing I wanted to mention about these two attributes specifically, the font family attribute, like Emily said, you can import fonts and stuff. There's a bunch of different fonts you can use, and those are all things you can look up. There's like endless amounts. But like, say you are like using Safari as a browser to like print out your page. Like sometimes like a certain browser doesn't like support certain fonts. So that's why you have this second font here with the comma. So if Arial isn't supported by your browser, then it will just default to any sans serif font that it does support. And you can like put as many fonts here as you want. I'm not sure if there's a limit, but you can put like a bunch of fonts separated by commas, and then like the order in which you put them is like the order in which they're prioritized. And then the border feature, the border attribute, I'm sorry, takes like the width of the border, like how thick it is, the type of border it has, so it could be solid, dashed, dotted. There's a bunch of different ways your border can be, and then the color. So you can also give like a hex number for a color here too.
And you can also define all of those attributes of a border separately. This is just a way to declare all of them in a single line, but you could also declare border dash color, and it would just define the color. And that's, again, useful if you're doing that whole cascading piece of the cascading style sheets. Just a thing to know.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about selectors. So there are 5 different types of selectors in CSS. We're really only going to talk about simple selectors, and I think we might go a little bit into combinator selectors, but they're not something you're really going to have to worry about. But these are basically like this part of the element which not the element of the CSS code that selects the item that you're looking for. So in that example, it was selecting like the paragraph elements. So yeah, a selector just looks for something in your HTML code. Okay, so simple selectors select elements based on their name, ID, or class. So in this case, it's selecting the and like anything that has a paragraph tag. In this one, we have the ID selector. So this is selecting anything with an ID set to my_ID. And that's once again HTML like attribute for like any type of element has like an ID attribute. Same thing with like my classes and names. You can also select anything within a certain class using the period. And then that would select anything with the my class and change its attributes. And then this is the universal selector. So if you just put an asterisk before your curly braces, then it will select every single element on that page and change any attributes you'd like about them. And then combinator selectors, these select elements based on a specific relationship between them. So we have the descendant selector, which you just separate it by a space. So say you have a paragraph element inside of a div element, then this will select that. So I'll show an example in a little bit, but that's how you would select a paragraph element inside of a div element. And then there's the child selector. So this selects all paragraph elements that are children of div elements. And we're not really going to get into like parent and child elements, so don't really worry about that. I just wanted to specify that. And then here's just a few things about selectors. So they can be combined. So if you have 2 types of elements, like a div element and a p element, or a paragraph element, that you on your HTML page, and you want to select all paragraph elements and all div elements, then you would separate them by a comma. And also if you wanted to select, say, all paragraph elements, but only the ones that have their class set to my class, then that's how you would grab it, just by concatenating it. And it's important in this case that you don't use a space in between any of this. So it's just the type of element and then a period and then the class name, all in one line. And you can make any declarations here. And then lastly, I just want to talk about the box model. So all HTML elements can be considered as boxes. This model helps developers visualize some type of, in some of these like invisible attributes that can wrap an HTML element. So the first element is the content. So this could be where an image or a text block appears. And this is just like a box that wraps around all of this content. Then outside of that content, we have the padding, which is just this transparent area between the content and the edge of the element. So the padding can be increased or decreased. I think its default is set to 0 pixels, but you can add more space so that there's space in between the element, like the content and the border. So then the border is like a line surrounding the element. And then there's the margin, which is an area outside of the border that separates elements. So this is like a better way of like, I guess, visualizing the box model. Basically, you have the height and width, which sets up the content. Like if you were to change the height and width of any HTML element, then it would affect the size of the box containing the content. And then outside of that box would be the padding. And so this you can is normally 0 pixels, but you could increase it to like as much as you want. And then outside we have the border. So this border, like we said, can be like changed to be like dotted, dashed, solid, any type of color, any type of width. And then this margin is the area around the border between elements. So if you have 2 elements that are next to each other and you don't want to make sure they don't touch, you would increase the margin, especially if you have a border. If you have no border, you can change the padding, but that really just creates a smaller space for your content. But yeah, I'm gonna actually do an example right now with the box method. Are there any questions so far about what I'm doing, or does anyone add anything?
So the model that you showed, I know this is true in Chrome. It's probably true in Firefox too, but I know it's true in Chrome. If you do the right click and pull up the developer tools and select an element, there is actually a visualization that it will show you of the styling of those nested boxes, so that you can have sort of like one of those visual representations of what you're looking at, so that if you're confused about, well, wait, is that too much padding or is that too much margin, I'm not really sure, then you can just like pop in there and take a look and get a really quick eyeball on it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think we haven't gone into developer tools, but I guess Danielle, if you like make an example, you can try bring up the developer tools. So
yeah, that's a great idea. I've done that before. It's actually a really great way of visualizing elements using the Chrome developer tools. But let me just share my screen again. And then in Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to open up this, the homework from this week, because that's what you're going to be building off of. And I'm going to add a link to an HTML file. I mean, sorry, a CSS file. Let's call it style.css. And is that all I need? Right, let me. Oh, href. Link equals. See, guys, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just copying off the slides, which is what I recommend all of you do. So L equals style sheet. And href equals style. And this is how you link an external CSS file. And now I'm just going to create a new file, style.css. And we're just going to get right into it. The way that CSS works is like you don't even need to like have any of that like garbage. I shouldn't call it garbage, but like any of this stuff that like doesn't make any sense to you on there. You just like go right into your selector. So not body. So say I want to change everything in the body. I could change the color to red. And if I update this, you'll see all of the font is red. So what Margaret was talking about was if you select any element on your page in Google Chrome, you can right click and click inspect, and it will show you these like developer tools. So this paragraph ID equals time, it shows you like the margin around it is that like yellow orange space, and then the content and like its border around it is the blue. So let me actually like play around with that paragraph. So I think that its ID is equal to time. Let me just check. So yeah, ID is time. So I'm going to select every element with the time ID using the hashtag or the pound, whatever you want to call it. And then let's set that text color to blue. Refresh that page. So now the text color is blue. And let's actually add a padding around it. You could add padding on like any side of the element that you want. I'm just going to create padding around all of it. So we'll set it to 10 pixels. Let's make a border. Set border color to black. Border width to 3 pixels. And then we'll add margins on all of the sides to be 5 pixels. We'll update that. And now you can see that the blue is the content, the green is the padding, and then the like tan color is the margin. So, and then in between this margin and the padding is the border. I don't know why the border isn't showing up. Border color, border width.
I think you need border style.
Border style. Oh, okay. Border style equals solid. And there you go. Yeah. So now you can see that like kind of gray area is where the border is. And I think this like really helps you like visualize the whole box model pretty well. Yeah. And then do you guys have any other ideas of like what I could demonstrate right now? As far as like any cool attributes that I can change on the page? Because there's so many.
Yeah, I guess one thing you can do is like add a background color so people like
Great
know the
idea.
difference between color and background color. Yeah, I'm actually
So
not tripped up over these two properties.
yeah, so I'm gonna select everything using the asterisk. I don't even think I need to select everything, but I'm not sure. We're just gonna set background color to, let's say, gray. You can also use like the whatchamacallit. I don't really like the way that looks. Maybe if you click this color button in Visual Studio Code, you can like select any color and any opacity that you want. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that word, but let's do like a pretty blue. That looks nice. Save that. And then the background color is that. I think if we make, we could change the background color of this and it'll only change that element. So let's try honeydew. That's a pretty color. Yeah, and then it'll change that. You could also change the opacity on that so that it shows a little bit of the background, but I'm having trouble selecting this color right now. Yeah, this like automatically does the RGB tool for you, RGB tool, which is like the amount of red in an element, the amount of green, and the amount of blue. And it creates a color based on that. Yeah, and then what else is it gonna? We could also like, I'll show you the border radius tool, which rounds an element. So let's say we made it to 20%. this will round off the edges of the border and make it more circular. I don't really like the way that looks. If we do border radius like left, wait, let me, how does this work again? Okay, border top left radius, and we said maybe like 50%. I think that'll round the top left edge. Yeah, it looks kind of weird because we have like a super like rectangular one, but you're gonna use this tool in whatchamacallit, in your like homework to create like a circle out of a square. So I'll actually show you how to do that right now. So let's say we wanted to add a div over here that just said, actually we won't make it say anything. We'll just save it like that. And then we'll select the div elements. And let's say height is 50 pixels, width is 50 pixels, border is 5 pixels, solid black, and it should just make a square. Awesome. And then we will set the border radius to 50%. And this will just round all of our edges so that we have a circle. I think that's a pretty neat tool. And you're not going to do that in this week's homework, but in next week's homework. But yeah, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head that might be useful to you guys. I think that CSS is pretty like simple to use, and like the worst part of it is that it is so like such like a big, I don't know what the word is.
It's like a lot you can do. It's like almost impossible for you to memorize every little thing that you can do.
Yeah, there's so much you can do with CSS, which is like one of its pitfalls. Like, but you'll notice like if I just start typing any letter, it will come up. The way that VSC works is like it will come up with a bunch of like different things for you to do. So like if you just like think that there's something you can add to your page, like you could just start typing it and it'll probably pop up.
But yeah, definitely like even with Danielle and I who like have experience with CSS, I don't know if it's just me, but I always find myself Googling like what properties I need to do because I never remember, because there's just so many things you can do with CSS, which is great, but it's also like you can't memorize everything. So yeah, it's a lot of Googling, a lot of experimentation. So feel free to like play around with it, go crazy, you know.
Yeah,
however you want.
Honestly, Google is your best friend as a programmer. Like you can find anything on there, and it's a very useful tool. You should never feel bad for looking stuff up on Google. Like that's literally what it's there for. And that's what being a programmer is. It's literally just like knowing what to Google. I had a whole discussion in one of my classes last semester about like what makes a good programmer, and someone literally just said like knowing how to like research and like Google things. My professor didn't like that answer, but everyone else agreed.
Are they wrong?
He was like, that's not what makes a good programmer. And I was like, we're all just like, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I guess it kind of is.
Yeah. I guess we are sorry about going over time again, folks. But if you guys have any, do any of you guys have any more questions or anything else you guys would like us to test out? If not, then thank you for coming to our live stream again this week. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And once again, I'm going to have the code from like last week's homework on the GitHub page, and I'll let you guys know how to get there once I upload it. And then the source code from today will also be uploaded, and like the links to the slides and everything.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you.
Yeah, bye guys. Thank you so much for coming.